Earlier this afternoon, we spoke to BBC reporter Noah Abrahams after he resigned from his job at the broadcaster after they failed to call Hamas terrorists. He said the BBC's refusal to use the correct terminology is unjustified. As a Jewish person, there's already enough fuel on the fire. And the person interviewing him was Peter Cardwell.
Fascinating interview with Noah, young man, 22 years old, and he has already had quite a good career at the BBC already. He's at BBC Radio Derby and other local stations. He's on the air, which, as you know, at a young age, it can be a tough thing to get. He's been commentating on League One matches. He is Jewish, and he has decided this whole controversy over the last few days, does the BBC call the Hamas terrorists or not? I think they're terrorists. I think a lot of other people do too. But the BBC will say militants, fighters, whatever, because they say they want to be impartial on it. And Noah said that he is resigning. We had a huge reaction. The clips are on social media at TalkTV. They've gone viral. And actually, since then, I've had contact from a number of veteran journalists being in favour of what he's doing. The Jerusalem Post has been in touch, offering him work. And I think he's probably got a bright future ahead. But interesting that someone so young and actually quite inexperienced has made such a principled stand.
Well, I'd like to say I second him in every possible sense of the word. And I worked at the BBC pretty much for 30 years on and off, mostly on. And I was absolutely horrified at their reluctance to use the word terrorist. Horrified. And in fact, I happened to be in a car going both to and from Hull the whole of Saturday. So I was forced to listen to every single news bulletin on Radio 4 for the whole of Saturday. I heard 8 news bulletins, and it was impossible to decipher what they were talking about. They were so obfuscating in the terminology that they used, you couldn't tell it was a terror attack. You couldn't tell. However much you knew, however hard you were listening, however much you were straining to understand what the broadcaster was trying to communicate, you couldn't understand it because they wouldn't use the correct terminology. You didn't understand what was going on. They kept focusing and focusing on what they kept calling Israel's failure of intelligence and not at all on the attack or the massacre itself. Absolutely abominable broadcasting in my view. And I wrote a column on Tuesday saying I was absolutely horrified that the organisation to which I'd given 30 years of my life, my passion, absolutely the heart and soul of my career to date, could be such craven cowards in the face of an appalling and blatant terror massacre of that kind. And I champion Noah every single step of the way. And I'm very glad that people are reaching out to employ him because he's shown such guts, hasn't he? And
he's shown a lot of guts, especially for someone so young.
Yeah.
And it is hard, especially when you're in a very large organisation, to say, actually, I'm not going to work for that organisation any longer because I disagree. It certainly wasn't. I actually used to work a long time ago at BBC Radio Derby. They're great people there. They do a good job on sort of quite tight resources as well. It wasn't against them per se.
No, of course not.
It was about the much larger
It's about an
organisation.
edict. It's about a central edict, isn't it? It's about free speech and the organ of communication that nevertheless puts out a central edict that pretends that the truth is something that it's not. And that's not acceptable. And he's done a great thing, in my view. Absolutely terrific. And when you see him say, I said Mazel Tov.
Oh, well, of course.
Peter, thank you very much indeed.